So the main idea is now to share my agenda. I will present the case that we coped with in Felk, and the case will be divided into two scenarios. The first will be more human resources ops, and the second will be demo about the real tech stuff and implementation. And here I need your help in terms of feedback to understand how to divide these parts. Um, who is working with Azure DevOps Services on daily basis? Oh, nice. And another part is just hearing and interesting in the tool. Yes? Okay. So the case, we started our journey 1.5 years ago, and the problem is that company started the transformation, and I don't know, have you heard the Conway law? That's one of the famous mathematicians that did a lot for theory of games, and one of the part of this his work was so-called Conway law that says that whatever you will try to do in your company, the architecture of your product and your application will reflect the architecture of your organization. And our problem was that when we started our journey, we had a lot of small different IT departments. They were not aligned at all, no shared processes, and when there was need to move one application development from one department to the second department, it was the real trouble because standards are different, source code base is different, rules, tools, everything was silos. And one of the idea was to ruin those silos. From organizational perspective, the top management decided to move all IT development and all IT related stuff to one global IT. And we started serving as one global IT for all customers, and from our perspective, our customers were internal Falk services. And that's around several hundred small and not small applications with absolutely different application lifecycle management and software development lifecycle. So the first case was to unite people in big department. And due to Conway law, we found a lot of problems because now we were united in one global IT, but the tool set was still siloed. We had Jira, we had Jenkins, we had TeamCity. So I think that from that time from the market, we had almost all tool, maybe except of Circle CI and something else. So we had around dozen different tools, and that was the problem. We were looking for something that first of all will help us to unite people and solve this problem due to the Conway law. And yep, that's another representation of the same idea. We started somewhere from this, and we are something like that, because now we have one department and it is hidden under the human resources API. Inside we have a lot of delivery teams cross-functional teams and business owners and stakeholders, they just communicate to one global IT, and behind the scenes magic is happening, and their business needs are transformed to the source code and then to the features on production. What was done, as I mentioned, we started from source code transformation. It was Bitbucket, GitHub, old version of TFVC. If you worked with TF or VSTS, or it was called TFS several years ago, it was there. Now they realized that it was not the best idea, so now only Git. Also, the classic of genre, we found some applications that were developed on local computers, and we also had to migrate them and provide some unified software development lifecycle. Pipelines and test plans and artifacts, that's the main tabs that you will see in Azure DevOps Services. The main idea here to show that you have one service from Microsoft that can help you to handle all application lifecycle management, starting from idea, from communication with stakeholders from the business, and until post-production support and deployment and wiki pages, artifacts. Some migration was done almost manually. I mean, here manually means that we decoupled orchestration layer from engine, from the scripts, and migrated the scripts, but the logic inside the script was done automatically. And the only problem that we had, and so far there is no solution, how to migrate test plans from different tool to Azure DevOps Services. We had long talks with these guys, this open source solution, and we use that for migration Jira stuff to Azure DevOps boards. They are now working on the same tool for test plans. So hopefully next year integration will be finished, and we can use this functionality as well. Yes. Yes. Yes, we started 1.5 years ago. During this year, we have migrated 40 projects, and in average, it was 3 Azure DevOps engineers. So first nine months was only me, and then joined a second person, and then 4 months ago 2 more. So average 3, and more than 40. That's now 41 project. And under project, I mean that it's some projects, they contain 4 or 5 different applications, and stack is very, very specific, taking into consideration that it's enterprise. So we had Salesforce applications, we had Boomi integrations, we had C#, we had, and it was even several applications on Silverlight. We had modern .NET Core applications. So the stack that can be covered with Azure DevOps Services is very wide. And it was pretty easy because the average speed was 1.5 project per person to migrate. So, and how it was done. Yes, that's about the digits. Idea was to reduce the platforms because we could not live with 9 different platforms, taking into account that now the same people had to use as source code and boards and deployment tools. We had to have the common UI, and this tool provides you with the one UI with one interface to switch between different stages of software development life cycles. We moved teams to the one team projects and set up the work on the boards in such way that they can see each other progress just clicking the several buttons with no change in tools. We have migrated 40 projects, and as I told, it's average 3 persons were involved. During this migration, we came up with such flow. So first of all, we decoupled the engine from orchestration layers. That means that, for example, if we started from migration from Jenkins or Octopus, the first rule was on that platform without any migration, ensure that deployment scripts or build scripts, they are not dependent on orchestration tool because that will give us the possibility to go back and forth in the future between different orchestration tools. So first step that was done, usually we updated the current flow on the current source tool. We prepared all environment variables, all dependencies, packages, rewrite the scripts to make the current logic, the current flow being triggered even from a local computer or without this orchestration layer. The second step was to migrate them as is. It was very, very hard because usually when you do the first step, you see a lot of room for improvements. Something was hard-coded, or something was not written well, or something was outdated. So you had very, very big desire to sit right now and make changes. Don't do this because you have to have this one-to-one mapping, because plan B always was to switch the same scripts back if production deployments are blocked or tool is rolled back something. So we migrated as is. Then a lot of time was spent on sharing knowledge with developers and get used with the new flow. Several first projects we decided to ignore this, and we found that people are nervous, and everything bad that was happening in the company, broken releases, someone broke leg, your tool will be guilty and you will be also guilty. So everything that you try to implement as unknown will be in the bad situation because nobody would like to use it. We spent a lot of time as being as DevOps engineers to share our knowledge and experience with users, with the stakeholders, with application managers, with developers, with operations guys. And only after the several months we switched the tools off. it was also very desirable to leave it as is, because, as I mentioned, third-party tool switched UI, for example, or switch endpoints. Nobody will check that. The first rule of thumb will be to say that Azure DevOps is bad because we just make these changes, and this will be like the red herring. So that's very important to have decoupled engine scripts just to move them back, reproduce the same issue on the old tool, and then switch them back. And unfortunately, it was picked up after several first pilot projects where we had the same problems. We started, as I mentioned, with 40 projects, so that's around 150 applications, because some of them are very huge and complex, and that means that we had to work with 150 application managers. So the problem was to start from someone, because it's like the army of the people. They got used with old stuff, and the problem was to baptize someone to our army, and start at least with someone. And here is also my takeaways. I did it several times in several companies, and this audience is always the same. And one sympathizer, one undecided, one bewildered, and one skeptic. And our goal to find one person who will agree on start making changes. Otherwise, you will be in the trouble, because you know that tool is good. All other DevOps society knows that tool is good, but in your particular company, your particular application managers will be either undecided or skeptic. It took me a while to find the person, and one of the last strikes that broke the camel back was the dialogue that I asked them to give it a try, and if it failed, it will be 100% of my fail. If we succeeded, it will be 50-50 of success. Application managers and DevOps engineers. That's very predictable, because due to social experiments, when you have positive feeling and negative feeling, negative feelings are always stronger, and usually it twice time more stronger than positive feedback. And people usually start thinking about their affairs and what will be wrong, but not think what will be the positive feedback. So if you want to start implementing something new, try to find what are the people's fears. It will help you to solve this problem. And in our case, we found that they were really afraid of downtimes in production. So we found one application manager who was not skeptic and not bewildered. He was around between undecided and sympathizer. And his application, by default, by business requirements, allowed us a lot of downtime. And the real problem was that on that time it was outsourced to third company, and deployment time from the commit to source code to seeing this feature on production, it was around several days. So it was so bad that the probability to make it worse was very minimal. And that was the plan A. And somehow now I cannot see my screen. Okay, I can see my screen. Yes, and we decided, and that was, by the way, it was Salesforce application. And the problem with the Salesforce was that you have no access to infrastructure, and you just promote it from the environment to environment with appropriate APIs. And final calls, even you have to go to website and swap the slots. So idea was to make this automated. And back to convey law. Our solution, keeping in mind that we have to somehow to push all people to work together, we came up with decision where we created one dedicated team project where we kept all boards for all teams. And as you know, who works with Azure DevOps Services, process template is applied to team project. That means one rule to all. You cannot say that someone is more special, or if you require some features or some flows in your daily life, please give some exclusions just for my department. Now, we moved to that, and that gave us a very good background to push people to talk to each other and say, if you have something to change in the process, please sit together, all application managers or their managers, come up with a solution, come back to us, we will implement one process in one process template that will be implemented to all teams inside this project. So that was our solution for ruining the silos, because in the past, in the Jira, they had a lot of customized processes, and they were keen on making customization just on the blink of an eye. So if someone wants, no agreements, no communication, so a lot of human walls, silences, and barriers. So, and that resulted with a very negative drawbacks in terms of overall progress. That was our feature, and if you know, you can map boards with source code across different team projects. So that was not a problem. We still have the functionality where every commit requires related work item. The only feature is that work item is hosted in a specific team project for all of them. And we came up with a second rule. So the first rule, to keep all boards in one team project and apply with one process template. And the second, just to have a mapping, we have as many area paths as team projects with the source code and where developers work. To have this mapping, and for the future, so far there is no such need, but I bet it will be, to limit access, because you know that area paths, and that's one of the way to limit access for different people to see the different stuff inside the team project. For people who how many people never ever worked with Azure DevOps? No one? Okay, one. For you, several tabs we have in Azure DevOps Services. First is code board, and this is green. This is like analog of Jira, where you keep your Kanban boards, work items, and communication. This based on logo related to source code. Now it's only Git. Rocket is about automated builds and automated deployments. Tests, chemistry is for testing, and that is binary artifacts repositories like Artifactory, like Nexus, like npm, Nugget.org. So you can work with all of them in having one tool. So, and that's now time for the demo. Demo will be, I will just show the use cases based on this theoretical part that will cover how we deal with boards. All people and a lot of people, and now we have 5 cross-functional delivery teams with one boards in one team project. Then several words about pipelines, but I think that you all know about pipelines. Analytics services is also very interesting for us. And I will start here maybe with current limitations. After more than 1 year using this tool in enterprise, we found several very drastic limitations for us. First of all is there is no flexible and agile permission metrics for boards. For example, as other tools have, for example, you can provide the very flexible access level for people that cannot contribute except of leaving messages in discussion points, for example, like it is in Jira. Or if you want to specify, for example, access to create only bugs but not features and user stories. So this limitation is absent at all, and we have to fix it on the human resources level. And so to talk to people, to teach them, grab feedback, monitoring, continuously see who breaks the rule and talk to them again. So unfortunately now this is the biggest pain for us, because you cannot fix it anyhow. Other problems that we have already fixed by Azure DevOps on steroids, and analytics services, that is former data warehouse on premise. Now they just move that on dedicated endpoint, and you can use with OLAP cubes there and grab a lot of useful data for business intelligence. So one limitation that we don't know how to fix, we are just waiting for improvements, and 2 limitations that we already fixed. We are really lacking the agile and flexible dashboards, because we would like to have a lot of statistics, and out of box it is not possible at all. And the second, some common rules. For example, we would like to have some automated stuff to create child in predefined mode when user story is created. We would like to have the predefined list of tasks to be created every time when user story or bug is created. Or another problem, now being part of big enterprise, we are still relying on enterprise level tools, and one of them is ServiceNow. We have a lot of stuff that started in ServiceNow, and only then, after several months of investigations, they come down to Azure DevOps to be developed. We try to find some integration tool between Azure DevOps Services and ServiceNow. We found one, but the prices was ridiculous, so we just developed our own. I will also show the cases, but it's very basic just to synchronize changes. If you create incident in ServiceNow, it will be replicated due to specific rules as counterpart in Azure DevOps Services. And room for improvements we will also discuss that I would like to share with you. And we start with the boards. I will switch to the browser mode just to show you the idea that I mentioned. You know the several layers of configuration. One is project configuration and another is team configuration. So we created as many teams as we had in our hierarchy. So now we have five teams. So I have created one team here, mapping one-to-one to delivery team in the office, and created the same area paths for each of them. Core team, business intelligence, for example, that's Falk Assistance Nordic. And then as many children as projects in organizations. So we have one-to-one mapping between the real delivery team personalities in the office and teams in the Azure DevOps Services. Then we have one-to-one mapping between child area path and team project with the source code and all builds and automated deployments. That means, for example, if you see here FHC booking, then you have opened the new tool and you definitely will find the same project with FHC booking, for example. That will give you the scalable approach to have ability in the future to switch on or switch off access permissions. So far we are building the trust, and all developers, they have grid access. But for example, somewhere in the future we decided to give one project for outsource. They will stick with our rules, with our process templates, because it is handled by, as you remember, one team project in solution delivery with the one process template. But the freedom will be limited by the dedicated team project, and they will not see all others. So that's very convenient for us. So this is very scalable and without any headache. So it's very clear, just two rules for one-to-one mapping, and I even don't know that they have any limitations in terms of team projects and area paths, but you have them a lot of. For the pipelines, if you all work with them, just one case from our side with one project where we have the same infrastructure as a code and application itself. All of you have experience with pipelines? Yes? Guys? You? So that is not interesting, so we can skip. give me any sign. Okay, okay. So the main idea, as you remember from the uh, theoretical part, we tried to move as is with the scripts and keep the infrastructure engines decoupled from infrastructure and orchestration tools. And in the repositories, we still have uh, our scripts that will do deployments, and they will be decoupled from orchestration tool. Uh, the better example will be, it's one big project for Felk Deco, our web website, and in repositories our main idea not to use the predefined tasks from Azure DevOps as much as possible and use just the executable part of our own logic. So we keep our logic in the source code. It partially it came from old tools, partially it was then updated. So we have all our deployments script together here, and then in the pipelines you have just PowerShell tasks to call your logic. That gives us the possibility very easy to migrate in the future to another tool if this is the case. Unfortunately, it is not easy and even possible sometimes, but our rule of thumb to keep as much in self-written scripts as possible and close to source code with application also as close as possible. Problem that we had after the implementation of all this stuff, now we have delivery teams, 5 of them, they are doing something, some features are presenting, how to show the business what is the cost of the development, because the simple dashboards, they are very, very modest. You can just see the burn down and that's all. Azure DevOps came from TFS on premise solution. There was the dedicated service with reporting server with data warehouses, all AP cubes, and they can build them. Now they moved this to analytics endpoint and all data queries. So you can build a lot of queries now out of Azure DevOps Services. And one of our rules also, we are trying to keep our core, like Azure DevOps Services, as clean as possible without any modifications, without uploading extensions there, custom build tasks, because that will make us in not a good shape in the future when we decide to move somewhere again, or if somehow for some reason service will start working slow. It's very hypothetical, but our rule, so keep as is the core that is provided by Microsoft, and all our customizations or steroids move out to another Azure services. In case of Azure DevOps Analytics, we we are using Power BI. Luckily, we have subscription. It's very easy to connect it, and when you authenticate, you are able to use all data feed to grab all data, and keep in mind that it works against the it works against OLAP data warehouse cube. So if you make some changes on your production, it can take up to 4 minutes to see the changes in analytics services. After that, you can, for example, our delivery team first request from them was to see the top 5 underestimated tasks or overestimated tasks, to see the dynamics and improve the estimations for the future, so to make the work more effectively. It was not possible with default tools in Azure DevOps Services, so Power BI and Analytics endpoint saved us, and for example several hours of work, and that's how it works. Then you're able to upload it to Power BI namespace, so-called. For that, you will require to have the license. This tool is free. You can use it and, for example, share somehow with your teammates if it is really needed. Otherwise, it will cost you. We have the license now. We have several well-developed reports. It's one of pages only. Now we have 5 or 6 pages of reports with data that I cannot show now. That will solve your problems if you are looking for something that is not present in the dashboards. Then, and that is local UI that will be the same visible in namespaces when you upload it. DevOps on steroids. So we had several problems, as I mentioned. For example, to make the updates with, for example, as it was done in Jira, and our application managers, they've gotten used to good features, and now we have to develop the same features from the old tool here. When you move all your children work items to the proper state, your parent state will stay in the old. For example, you start your feature with development state, then you closed all the tasks, your user story will still be in development. It will not be updated. Or you create the bug and you have prescribed procedure that every bug has to have 4 tasks. Task 1 to estimate, evaluate, fix, double check, for example. Every time person created bug, he or she had to go there and create for tasks. Or integration with Servicenow. Every time we move our bug or feature from state to state, we had to go to Servicenow and update there. So this logic is out of scope partially. Partially, it is in Azure DevOps developers backlog, which is, by the way, accessible for everyone. You can go and see in which sprint they will implement some of your features that you are waiting for several years. The only stuff that we can use, service hooks and rules. Have you had experience with rules and service hooks? Okay, nice. So in the two places, excuse me, that is the biggest in terms of demo. So hooks, that is process template where you can modify. Now it's very easy, and that is very dangerous, because if something is easy, you can make a lot of changes. And if application managers or business knew how easy it is to to make changes, I would have a lot of problems because, as I told you, everyone in the company will want to make some customizations. Nobody will read documentation. Everyone just will go and ask you to make some. Don't do this. Keep these process templates as clean, as default as possible. Otherwise, when you start migrating, you will have problem. And even before migration, you will have problems because I will show you now because why. You see two different organizations. Being DevOps engineer and trying to convince people that we have pre-prod environment, I had no pre-prod environment, and it was very inconvenient for me to make some changes just on production version of Azure DevOps Services. In December, they changed their monetary policy, and from December, if two organizations are hosted in the same subscription in Azure, you can create as many Azure DevOps organizations as you want, and you will pay only for the one license for the one person, and this license will be valid for in other organizations only if they are in the same subscription and probably in the same region. I'm not sure about the region. So that will provide you the possibility for free of charge to have pre-production version of your Azure DevOps services and play with the sandboxes, try templates, try rules and service hooks without touching the production environment. And here you will have problem if you have your custom templates instead of out of box templates processes, because when you start migrating your process template from production to prep prod or vice versa, you will have a lot of issues with XML files to make this mapping. So again and again, try to keep these process templates untouchable and move all logic to outside of Azure DevOps Services. How to move the logic outside of Azure DevOps Services? First of all, service hooks. And sorry for jumping back and forth. Back into process templates. What are rules? The rules are set of predefined actions that are triggered after predefined cases. For example, bugs. If you go to bugs, hang on. So here there are rules. On the at the current moment, it's very limited and it doesn't cover all my needs, but you can start using it. For example, you can specify for every time when you make changes or create new work item or whatever from the list. So when something is when something has happened, action will be triggered. This works inside Azure DevOps services, no service hooks, no other connectivities. So it's just internal implementation, and this is very limited. And you cannot move it from pre-prod to prod, so you have just so far to copy paste logic. But for some very simple stuff, it's helpful. And service hooks. You can integrate your Azure DevOps services with a lot of other Azure services or other tools, for example. We are using only one approach. We are using Azure Service Bus queues, and all our steroids we are keeping in Azure Functions. For example, every time we create the new bug, message goes to queue. Queue triggers Azure Functions. Azure Functions triggers back Azure DevOps Services via API. The same, we have implemented the integration between Servicenow and Azure DevOps Services. The same will be scaled any new features that will come from business, because I see this approach is very scalable. And for example, and this idea also is, so idea for Azure DevOps is implemented by Azure DevOps and being hosted as we have DevOps specific project for that. And the same, we have several repositories that's for Azure functions that we have now, for example, four of them. When bug is created to create new features, then sync with Azure DevOps. That is master, yes. 5. One is in release feature feature branch, and custom update of our custom fields that was the requirement from the business. And the second, we are using Terraform to spin up the infrastructure for, it's very simple, just Azure just service bus, queues, Azure functions, and app insights to see the monitoring. And now you can scale this solution. You can go to Azure Functions, write the new function, and keep your core of your Azure DevOps Services clean. Steps for improvement that I really want to try, but I have no time, frankly. Terraform developed the new provider for Azure DevOps. So now you can create new team projects, assign new permissions, or set up some changes or rules for Git repositories with Terraform provider. It's kind of limited. They just have, let me open the link. It's again, for basic rules, it could be enough. So you can create the repository, create build definition, which is now out of date because you can use YAML templates, and every time you publish your code, it will be ready to go. But I see this idea very useful because sometimes I have to keep in mind some document our rules, how we provide permissions for different groups of managers. I would like to move that to infrastructure as a code instead of wiki pages or some documentation. So we keen on documentation in the source code. And more powerful tool, I'm not sure if you're using that, Azure DevOps CLI. That's part of AZ CLI tools tool set. You can do a lot of stuff here, and it is already helping me to make changes in immutable way. So that is two ways for improvement for me personal, and one big feature that I'm lacking with permission metrics. So now Q&A session. Ask questions, share your experience. Yes. Uh, so shame to me, they are written not in the .NET Core and not on the C Sharp. It's PowerShell. But anyway, for example, the when bug is created. So that is general template for Azure Functions. You can create the new project in the Visual Studio Code. It will generate this structure. In function JSON, you specify the connectors, input variables, output variables, or how your function will be triggered. In our case, it's Azure Service Bus Queue messages, and either this function is enabled or disabled. This doesn't work because Azure Functions, they added their own environment variable instead of this notation, and this notation is ignored, but due to documentation is must be there. So synopsis, that is the main out-of-box name convention for Azure Functions. This variable is PS custom object that will contain the message in the JSON format that will came from queue message. So this is done by default by Azure Functions. You don't need to read messages. It's up to Azure to handle, and you will have I will show you later. So that is how you specify the API endpoint. That is a little bit messy. That's why I decided to show you this part. You specify the payload object that you will post. Yes, in this case, patch. How you will define the titles and fields in your work item to make the changes. That is very interesting. There you specify the. Can I make it? No. So that is almost not documented by Microsoft. When you want to create the work item with relationship to another work item, you have to dive into API requests because they have no documentation. They have only 2 articles in the Google, and they are not on the first list of the Google search. So this notation will map work item from this URL as parent because they have hierarchy reverse, that means parent, and inverse as a child. Accessors and predecessors I have even not started because it was not needed for that time. And then you just create the invoke web requests, and that's all. Then we found that we are reusing code and we started using models. It's like, for example, we have functions which we usually use, like call something, or for example, get work item as JSON objects, or push something, or just invoke. So they are reused, and it's also very convenient to use them then in Azure Function. You just import model, and all functions that you wrote previously, they will be available here. That's from the source code perspective. They are deployed same with pipelines and releases. And from Azure Functions perspective, let me find something. For you, let's I will show you the same code how it's hosted in Azure Functions and uh, mapping between source code setup and okay. So this resource group is very simple and it was deployed with another Terraform script from the same team project from another repository. You see just Azure Functions, service bus, several queues. We are trying to keep it simple. We are not using topics. It will be more elegant just because of price. Topics are 6-7 times more expensive than queues. So yes, and by default it's very convenient. So they just created the dead letter message count. So everything it is not your headache. You just upload the code and you don't play with integration between service bus and application services. And that is the same representation. As soon as you start deploying it from the source code, you will not be able to update the source code from this UI. It will only thing that you can update are they on or off the same source code. And in the integration, you will see the details that were in the function JSON file, to which namespace to connect and to which queue to connect. That's so. Let's imagine you will see several text boxes here with the same information. Yep, here they are. Yep. Monitoring is very useful. Very interesting that not all flows are redirected to output for monitoring. So you have to play with either to put is in output to see them here or just to put them into so play with logging and yep. Also the problem is that after the function is triggered and logs are already, because behind the scene this is just the abstraction above the local log analytics, because all this data come from log analytics. It can take you up to 5 minutes to see logs here. So if you're debugging and you have lack of time, it will irritate you because you have to wait. So, and that's all. Application insights. Next step, when I'm done, this function is under development. Enable alerts for failed Azure functions, and alerts will create the bugs in the Azure DevOps. So it will be the full cycle. More questions? Yes. Now more than 200. More 200 application developers and 50 developers and maybe 80 application managers more, and around 40, so around 500 people. Okay, the first, okay, how did we come to solution to stop with this tool but not other tool? Okay. For us, it was very easy because we had no alternatives. Because you see, one of our requirements were to have service, not the hosted solution. We had no resources and time to administrate, update databases, so that must be hosted. The second requirement, it must cover the all stages of software development lifecycle. So from boards to deployments. Because I saw the problem to unite people. One UI, one credential, and it's single sign-on. You even don't need the credential. You have to have all people unified. Then and that's could be a point for discussion. I really love this tool, and I was sure that I can sell it to application managers and convince them, because I tried a lot of other tools, and I definitely know that I would have no such desire, emotions, and good and positive experience to convince people to start using this tool. So two factors are objective and one subjective. Because, for example, what other tools do you know that are services and you can, with the same UI, work with boards, source code, builds, deployments, artifacts, and tests? One of the rule that we agreed, we will not host projects simultaneously on the tools. So we always do one-way migration, so no way back. So if you go here, so no, we are not supporting, and that helped us also a lot to convince people and make the decision. So now that's enough. And small pilot projects. You do small projects, and that try to, it's like fail fast, go fast. We start with the small projects, and that will give us that gave us the confidence in making the decision.